He had nothing left. No money, no strength, no answers. Alone in a dim, quiet apartment in Los Angeles, he stared at the empty walls that had once echoed with dreams. The silence was heavy, almost sacred, as if the space itself had paused to witness what would happen next. His name was Jonathan, a man who had once dreamed of the stars. As a child in New York, he wanted to be an astronaut. He would lie on the roof, gaze at the night sky, and wonder what was out there. But life, as it often does, redirected him. Instead of space, he found himself drawn to the world of cinema. Lights, scripts, performances. He wanted to tell stories, to move hearts, to create something that would live beyond him. He studied film. He learned the craft. He took jobs, any jobs. He worked as a production assistant, a voice actor, a background extra. He smiled through rejection, endured long days, and waited tables to pay rent. For years, he pressed on, believing that persistence was enough, until it wasn't. By 2018, the weight of years without breakthrough had become unbearable. The bank account was dry. Bills piled up on the floor. The dreams that once burned bright were now flickering shadows. Jonathan was not just out of money, he was out of hope. One night, with no one to call and nowhere to turn, he fell to his knees. The tears came hard and fast, as if they had been waiting for permission. "God," he whispered, "I can't do this anymore. Please take this from my hands. I don't know how to keep going." He didn't pray expecting a miracle. He prayed because there was nothing else left to do. In that surrender, raw, stripped of pride or performance, something shifted, not outside him, not yet, but within him a quiet peace entered like a whisper, a strange calm in the middle of his chaos. 3 months passed. No grand signs, no sudden success. He continued surviving, uncertain but oddly still. And then, on a perfectly ordinary day, the phone rang. It was Dallas Jenkins, a director Jonathan had once worked with in a minor production years ago. The two had kept in light contact, but this call felt different. Dallas had a proposal. He was creating a new series about Jesus Christ, one unlike anything made before. He wanted Jonathan to play the lead. At first, it sounded almost too surreal. Another project? Another maybe? But there was something in Dallas's voice, something sincere, almost urgent. He wasn't offering a role. He was extending a calling. Jonathan hesitated, not because he doubted the message, but because he doubted himself. Could he carry something this sacred? Could he portray Jesus in a way that honored both the man and the message? But something inside him said yes. Not because he felt worthy, but because he finally understood that worthiness wasn't the point. Willingness was. And so, with trembling hands and a heart cracked wide open, he stepped forward, not into a role, but into a path that would reshape not only his career, but his soul. The first time he walked onto the set, dressed as Jesus, something unexplainable happened. The dusty roads built to resemble ancient Galilee, the modest stone homes, the sun above, it all felt real, too real. There was a stillness in the air, as if heaven itself was watching. From the very beginning, Jonathan felt it. This wasn't acting, it was something deeper. What he didn't know was that the journey he had just accepted would lead him through valleys of unspeakable pain, moments of spiritual warfare, and encounters so profound they would leave even the most skeptical crew members in awe. But that story was just beginning to unfold. If this moment has touched your heart, we invite you to be part of our community. Click to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a simple gesture, but it helps this message of hope and love reach more people. And if you believe in the power of spiritual stories, stay close. This journey is just beginning, and we want you with us every step of the way. The call wasn't just an opportunity, it was a lifeline. When Dallas invited Jonathan to portray Jesus, it wasn't with the fanfare of Hollywood or the promise of fame. It was quiet. personal, almost sacred. And Jonathan, still carrying the weight of unanswered prayers and silent nights, said yes, not with certainty, but with surrender. The project, at first glance, was modest. A crowd-funded series about the life of Christ. It didn't sound like something that would turn the world upside down. But Jonathan soon realized this wasn't about turning the world upside down. It was about turning hearts inside out. The early days of preparation were intense, not in glamour or pressure, but in spiritual depth. Jonathan found himself returning to prayer with a hunger he hadn't felt in years. Every line he read, every parable he studied, stirred something sacred within him. He wasn't rehearsing, he was awakening. And then the filming began. The set was unlike anything he had ever seen. In the hills of Texas, a replica of Galilee had been built with reverence and precision. Muddy roads, stone homes, olive trees, the warmth of the sun pressing against the earth, it felt holy, as if the land itself had memory. On the first day of shooting, Jonathan walked into costume, stood before the mirror, and saw Jesus looking back. He stared, not recognizing himself, but recognizing something greater within him. His heart pounded, his hands trembled. This wasn't pretend. This was purpose. That first scene, though simple, marked a shift. He looked into the eyes of another actor playing a leper, and as he reached out, channeling the compassion of Christ, he felt a surge of love so real it brought tears to his eyes. The director called "cut," but Jonathan couldn't stop weeping. Something had opened inside him, something he couldn't close again. As the days turned into weeks, that feeling only grew. One of the most powerful moments came during the filming of the Sermon on the Mount. Hundreds of extras gathered under the heat of the Texan sun. Dressed in tunics, barefoot on dry soil, they looked like echoes of ancient times. Jonathan stood at the top of the hill, heart pounding, eyes scanning the faces below. And then he spoke. His voice wasn't loud or theatrical. It was steady, clear. With each word, something flowed through him, something that felt borrowed from heaven. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. The words, so familiar on paper, now pulsed with fire and tenderness. He wasn't acting anymore. He was simply letting God speak through him. When the scene ended, the crowd was silent. Many had tears running down their cheeks. Some crew members turned away, overcome by something they couldn't explain. Jonathan walked off set and collapsed into a quiet corner. The weight of what had just happened pressed into his chest, not with pain, but with awe. He felt like a vessel, and that realization changed everything. But along with that beauty came a strange heaviness. Not everything on set was light. As the filming continued, Jonathan began experiencing things he couldn't explain. Tightness in his chest, sudden dizziness, a piercing pain in his ear that wouldn't go away. Doctors found nothing, no infection, no clear cause. It was as if something unseen was resisting him. One afternoon, unable to bear it, he texted his spiritual advisor in desperation. "Please pray for me," he wrote. 15 minutes later, the reply came, "I'm praying a rosary for you now." And just like that, the pain vanished. Jonathan sat in stunned silence. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. He was walking into spiritual territory, and the forces around him were real. From that point on, he never stepped on set without prayer. Every morning he clutched the rosary. Every evening he surrendered the day back to God. This wasn't just a job. It was a calling, and callings came with battles. But with every challenge, there was also grace. A sudden breeze during a scene of healing, a quiet moment of peace in the middle of chaos, a camera malfunction that led to a more powerful take than anyone had expected. These weren't just film accidents. To Jonathan, they were divine reminders that God was there, guiding, guarding, and pouring light into every frame. What began as a role had become a mission, a sacred trust. And he knew now, without doubt, that his life would never be the same. By the time filming reached the heart of Jesus' ministry, Jonathan could feel a shift, not in the script, not in the production, but in the atmosphere. Something unseen had awakened around him and within him. He began to feel drained, not just physically, but spiritually. There were days he would wake up with a heaviness pressing on his chest, as if something wanted to silence the light he was carrying. The joy of portraying Christ remained, but alongside it came moments of deep emotional exhaustion. Scenes portraying miracles would leave him weeping off camera. Scenes of betrayal would haunt him through the night. It wasn't acting anymore, it was real. The boundaries between performance and presence had blurred. One morning during the shoot of a particularly emotional healing scene, Jonathan sat in the makeup chair when a sharp, inexplicable pain tore through his right ear. It was blinding, disorienting. The crew paused everything. He tried to push through, but he couldn't focus. The pain was too intense. And yet there was no medical explanation, no injury, no illness. Just pain, pure, raw, and seemingly coming from nowhere. Fighting off panic, he reached for his phone and messaged his spiritual guide once more. "Something's wrong. I need prayer." The reply came swiftly. "I'm praying the divine mercy now." Within 15 minutes, the pain disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. It was in that moment that Jonathan stopped wondering if he was under spiritual attack and started preparing for the reality that he was. He wasn't just telling Jesus' story, he was entering it. And just as Christ had walked through opposition, so too would he. But even in the midst of darkness, the light never left. There were moments that defied explanation. Like the time during a scene of miraculous healing, a gust of wind swept through the set, just as Jonathan laid his hand on the man's head. No fans, no weather change, just wind, sudden, gentle, and undeniably timed. Or when a baby on set, completely silent throughout the day, let out a cry at the exact moment Jesus proclaimed, "Let the children come to me." The timing sent chills down everyone's spine. Crew members stood in stunned silence, eyes wide, knowing they had just witnessed something sacred. The set, more and more, felt like a place where heaven brushed earth. But the most profound challenge came during the filming of The Last Supper. As Jonathan looked across the table at the actor portraying Judas, a friend in real life, he felt a surge of emotion that caught him off guard. The betrayal wasn't just historical anymore, it was personal. And when Judas rose to leave, Jonathan's heart broke in a way he hadn't prepared for. He left the set quietly that day. No words, just silence. A silence filled with weight and wonder. For days afterward, he felt hollow, as if something had been taken from him. He described it later as a kind of spiritual emptiness, a dark night of the soul. But even then, he never resented the pain. Instead, he welcomed it. Because he knew it was part of the journey, part of the sacrifice. It was during this season of inner struggle that Jonathan truly discovered the power of prayer, not as a distant tradition, but as a living, breathing force. Every night he clung to the rosary. Every morning he whispered the Divine Mercy Chaplet before stepping into character. These weren't habits, they were lifelines, his armor, his shield. And slowly, through those quiet prayers, something began to change. The exhaustion gave way to peace. The fear gave way to strength. Not because the battle had ended, but because he no longer walked alone. He had surrendered everything, and in return received grace upon grace. His role was no longer just about performance. It had become an offering. And that offering was beginning to transform not just him, but everyone around him. If this message moved your heart, we invite you to walk this journey with us. Click subscribe and like this video to support our growing community of faith and reflection. Your presence matters. Together, we're building a space of love, light, and spiritual renewal, and there's always room for you here. As The Chosen moved forward season after season, something deeper began to unfold within Jonathan. This was no longer about a television series. It wasn't about the cameras, the sets, or the scripts. It was about the hearts being reached, millions of them, through a story that was more alive than fiction, more sacred than art. One of the most defining moments of his journey came during the filming of the Garden of Gethsemane. Jonathan had known from the beginning that this scene would demand everything from him, emotionally, physically, spiritually. He spent hours in silence before the shoot, praying, meditating, seeking strength beyond his own. And when the director finally called action, he surrendered completely. Kneeling in the garden, surrounded by darkness and quiet, Jonathan whispered the words of Jesus, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." But as he spoke, those lines no longer felt like words from a script. They became a cry from his own soul. He felt the anguish, the weight, the aloneness, and with it a love so vast it broke him open. The entire crew stood frozen. Some had tears streaming down their faces, others couldn't speak. No one moved when the scene ended. Jonathan remained there, hunched over, trembling. The silence on set was thick with reverence. It was as if, in that moment, heaven had brushed the earth. Days later, in a quiet interview, he described it simply. "I felt the pain of the whole world in that moment. But even more than pain, he felt a presence, gentle, unwavering, holy. And that's when he knew this wasn't just about portraying Jesus, it was about carrying him." Since its release, The Chosen has become a global phenomenon with over 200 million views and translations in more than 50 languages. But the numbers were never what mattered to Jonathan. What mattered were the letters, the messages from viewers who found healing. The testimonies of broken families reunited, of people who had walked away from God and through the series had found their way back. He read those stories with tears in his eyes, not because they praised him, but because they praised the one he was trying to represent. Because somewhere in the middle of makeup, lighting, and memorized lines, lives were being changed. Not by him, but through him. And that, he realized, was the miracle. The moments of prayer behind the scenes, the invisible battles, the sleepless nights, they were not in vain. Every tear, every ache, every whispered, "Jesus, help me," had become part of something far greater than he could have imagined. Today, Jonathan walks this path with peace in his heart. He knows there will be more struggles, more weight to carry, but he also knows that he does not walk alone. The love that called him into this role continues to guide him, strengthen him, hold him. His faith is no longer something he speaks of, it's something he lives. Every look he gives on screen, every moment of silence, every gentle smile as Christ, it all comes from a place of deep surrender. A knowing that true strength doesn't come from pretending to be holy, but from being honest in brokenness and letting God fill the cracks with light. And that light, once lit, doesn't go out. The story of The Chosen is not just a portrayal, it's a movement of love. It's a testimony to what happens when a person surrenders their talent, their career, their very self to something higher. And it's proof that when we let go, God writes stories we could never write alone. Jonathan's journey is far from over. New seasons lie ahead, both on screen and in life, but now, more than ever, he walks with purpose. Because he knows the role of a lifetime is not measured in fame, but in faith. And the world is watching not to be entertained, but to be reminded that there is still hope, there is still grace, there is still a Savior who knows our pain, who walks with us, and who speaks through the most unexpected voices. Even now he's speaking. Are you listening? If this journey has touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Click the video appearing on your screen now. It contains a powerful and glorious message that might be exactly what your soul needs next. Please consider subscribing to our channel and liking this video to support a growing community rooted in faith and love. You matter here, you are welcome here, and together we'll keep walking toward the light. Amen.